This happened just last year. My buddy Jimmy is pretty involved and well-connected in the music scene, specifically the dance and electronic music community across the East Coast, especially in New Jersey and New York. Honestly, it's impressive what he and his team have built in just 2 years. Basically, their company hosts what they call events at high-profile venues, usually the most well-known clubs or party spaces in whatever city they re-in. Then, they bring in big-name DJs, often borderline famous. I'm not super into that scene myself, so I don't always know the names, but I can say there have been some seriously huge acts in the mix. Anyway, enough background. Jimmy and I go way back. I've known him for over 20 years, and he's been my best friend for most of that time. Because of our friendship, he lets me and a bunch of our other hometown friends into his events for free. We even get to hang out in the VIP section with the performers. It's actually really cool, and I don't think I tell him enough how much I appreciate it. So Jimmy had this massive event planned for 4th of July weekend down at the Jersey Shore. Jimmy invited me to come down early with him, and of course, I said yes. It was supposed to be his biggest one yet, and all of our mutual friends were going. He, Ryan, and I made the hour-and-a-half drive and arrived at the venue about 4 hours before the doors opened. Since Ryan and I weren't involved in setting things up, we decided to get a head start on the drinking. Jimmy and his team had access to unlimited booze, courtesy of the venue, and Ryan and I definitely took advantage. By the time the first DJ started his set, we were both more than a little buzzed, to put it mildly. Honestly, I don't think I've been that drunk since, not even close. It was 4th of July weekend, so we figured our degenerate behavior was justified. But either way, we were having a great time, at least, that's what I remember. Fast forward a couple hours, and we were completely wasted. Don't get me wrong, Ryan and I are grown men. We can handle our alcohol. We weren't throwing up or making fools of ourselves. The issue was more about lowered impulse control and poor decision-making. As the night wound down, it was that point where people figured out how they were getting home or who they were going home with. I think it was Marcella who first suggested the 4 of us go somewhere else to keep the party going. Jimmy had rented a nearby Airbnb and promised Ryan and me our own beds, so we were set on that front. The second part, who we were going home with, was on my mind. Ryan and I made our way to the bar and started chatting with 2 girls we found attractive. I'm pretty sure their names were Gianna and Marcella, though I might be misremembering. Things get fuzzy around this point. Naturally, Ryan and I were down. Gianna handed us each a drink and told us to get on their level before we left heaven, though. Ryan and I had already consumed enough alcohol to match her entire body weight. I know girls giving guys drinks sounds a bit odd, and it was. But the way they were dressed, it was obvious they had money. They just gave off a different vibe, wealthy, confident, in control. After finishing the drinks, we left the venue together. Outside, Marcella suggested we go back to her Plaza Beach house nearby. That surprised me. I had assumed we'd go back to our Airbnb, since it is usually the guys who host. But they insisted her place was way nicer than anything we had, and they were right. We didn't argue. We walked along the beach and talked. I actually remember being impressed by how smart and interesting they seemed. It was refreshing to have a real conversation, something other than club chatter or mindless drunken talk. I started feeling a bit self-conscious about how drunk I was. It felt like I couldn't express myself clearly and probably looked like an idiot. That's when I noticed something was off. I suddenly felt drunker than I had a few minutes earlier. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into myself. But it wasn't normal drunk. My legs felt flimsy, like cardboard. Moving my arms, my mouth even, my eyes, became difficult. My hands and feet started going numb. But just as fast as the feeling hit, it passed. I was back to normal drunk, if that makes any sense. Then we got to the beach house. It was insane, like something a professional athlete might own. I might be exaggerating because I was drunk, but the place was stunning. Inside, we took off our shoes and stepped into what I assume was the living room. The design was surreal, minimalist, but luxurious. There were actual sculptures on pedestals, yet it didn't feel cluttered or gaudy. Everything looked like it belonged. I wish I'd taken pictures, but I wasn't thinking straight. Ryan clearly wasn't either, because within 15 minutes, he and Marcella had disappeared. That left me alone with Gianna. She leaned in to kiss me, and that's the last thing I remember. Not the kiss. Just her leaning in. Everything after that is blank. I don't remember drinking more. I don't remember walking. But I know I didn't pass out, because there are texts from me on my phone that show I was still conscious. I was definitely still functioning, but I remember none of it. Now, before you say I just blacked out from drinking, hear me out. I rarely black out. And when I do, I usually remember something, scattered images or moments, enough to piece things together. But this, nothing. And I was in T, even as drunk as I've been on past occasions when I still didn't black out. Plus, Ryan went through the exact same thing at the exact same time. That's too coincidental. The next thing I remember, waking up in the bushes. It was broad daylight. The sun was directly overhead. I was over an hour away from the venue. I didn't know that at the time because I didn't have my phone. In fact, I didn't have anything. No wallet, no keys. But here's the weirdest part. Wasn't even wearing my own clothes. I was wearing someone else's, a total stranger's. The only thing that was mine was my shoes. Even those were wet and missing their laces. I laid there for a minute, trying to make sense of where I was. Judging by my shoes, it looked like I'd been in water. But I didn't smell like salt water or chlorine. My head was pounding. It felt like waking up from anesthesia. Everything was fuzzy and wrong. I walked straight there and asked the guy behind the counter if I could borrow his phone. I eventually stood up and looked around. I wasn't in a beach town. I was in some random area surrounded by trees. The only thing nearby was a 7-Eleven across the road. After staring at me for a second, probably wondering if I was trying to scam him, he handed it over. The only number I had memorized besides my parents' was my sister's. What if he was still out there, drugged, lost, or worse? And there was no way in hell I was calling my parents. My sister picked up right away. I tried to explain what had happened. She gave me Ryan's number, and I called him a bunch of times, but no answer. He told me his story, and, yep, it was exactly the same. That's when I really started panicking. What if the same thing had happened to him? I was just about to call the police when, out of nowhere, Ryan walked into the 7-Eleven. We stared at each other in disbelief, then hugged. That sealed it for us. We called the cops. To their credit, they took us seriously at first. But the more we explained, the more skeptical they became. They asked if we were sure we hadn't just gotten too drunk. Maybe we'd wandered off and passed out somewhere. They weren't accusing us outright, but their tone was shifting. I told them it didn't make sense that we would drunkenly walk over an hour away. They didn't like that comment. I gave them my sister's number, and she told them my phone had pinged in a parking lot nearby. We drove there with the police and, sure enough, both our phones were lying on the pavement next to each other. That only reinforced their theory that we'd just been drunk and careless. They told us we probably lost our wallets the same way we lost our phones. We tried convincing them to check out Marcella's house, the one she claimed was hers, but they shut that down fast. One of the cops even said, "Happens more than you think." They gave us their cards and left. After they left, I checked my phone. That's when things got even stranger. There were texts sent from me to a bunch of people, Jimmy. My parents, coworkers, girls I'd been talking to. The messages sounded exactly like me, calm, coherent, casual. But the content made no sense. One message to Jimmy said we crashed at a friend's place. Another to a girl said I was just relaxing at home. One to my dad said we were safe and found a couch to sleep on. None of them aligned. They contradicted each other. It was like someone was impersonating me. Jimmy had called and texted me a bunch, worried sick. When I called him, he sounded relieved. He came to pick us up. On the way home, Ryan and I canceled our cards, but weirdly, none had been used. Not once. We talked about it the whole ride home. None of it made sense. Yes, we were drugged. That much was obvious. But why? Why go through all that trouble, just to rob us sand, not even use our stuff? We had approached them, so we couldn't have been targeted, right? Nothing? And the clothes, we still can't explain the clothes. We even checked ourselves for incisions, afraid they had stolen our organs. Later, we went back to the beach and tried to retrace our steps. Eventually, we found the house. We rang the bell. An older man answered. I asked him if someone named Marcella lived there or if he had a daughter or granddaughter our age. He said no. I made up a story about a girl who lied about owning the house. He laughed. That was it. But I walked away feeling sick. Not scared, just off. Like something awful had happened to us that night, and we'd never get the answers. I still believe those girls were part of something much bigger, something Ryan and I couldn't even imagine. Maybe they were planning to kidnap us. Maybe worse. Maybe they changed their minds at the last second. I know I'll probably never know the truth. But if anything else ever happens, I'll send another update.